Hello everyone, Jack Delahy here, founder of collegeconsulting.us. This is my first one of these type of videos. I'm kind of excited, got myself a new whiteboard here, and welcome to my office. This is where I hang out and help high school students and parents with the college planning journey. Today should be a fun video. I'm going to go through actually the 6 items that are low-hanging fruit when it comes to college planning. These are items that, having done this now for 13 years and help coach high school students and their parents through the college planning journey, I've identified anyone can do it and actually do it quickly, easily, and get the ball rolling in college admissions. So let's start out. Number 1 on the list. Visit schools nearby. Now, I have an entire YouTube video about this as well. You can go back and check it out. This was back in the fall when I was walking around my block. But number 1, visit schools nearby. A lot of families come to me and they say, Jack, I don't want to have to get on an airplane, but I'm also not quite sure. Does this school align with my child's vision in the future? How much is it going to cost to visit? Is it worth it to visit? And they start getting in this mental cycle that's difficult to get out of. Number 1, just visit schools nearby. You can visit schools that are within driving distance. These schools do not have to be anywhere close to making your child's final school list. They truly don't. The goal at the start of visiting schools nearby isn't to actually assess that specific school. It can be to assess different types of schools. For those that watched my previous YouTube video, you know this, but I'll go through it. There's 6 mix and match categories here. Big or small, urban or rural, campus or no campus. And for those that are wondering, well, campus, no campus, what does that mean? There's a very different vibe when you go visit NYU in New York City versus if you go to Williams College in Western Massachusetts, right? Williams College is very much a campus environment. NYU, you're walking around the city. Same goes for big or small or even urban or rural. So the point is, if you're looking to have that low-hanging fruit and say, I just want to have my child start to understand what college is like, take a couple road trips, make them all within 3 hours of driving distance, get in the car on a Saturday, sign up for the information session and tour, and just go visit a few colleges that are within driving distance. It doesn't have to be a big deal. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money. It doesn't have to require a flight, and it doesn't have to require a hotel room, etc. You can just go visit. And if you do that 3 or 4 or 5 times at a bunch of nearby colleges, again, even if those colleges will never make your child's final list, I can tell you confidently your child is going to have a much better understanding of the type of environment that they want to be in. Right? There's a certain type of student that is going to love the NYUs of the world, being in a city, not really caring if they have a campus. And there's also certain types of students who need that campus environment. You can then take those nuggets and say, okay, based on these 3 or 4 or 5 visits, what do you like? What do you dislike? And now you can actually start building a school list. So low-hanging fruit of college visits, you don't have to be thinking long-term of, would my child end up here? You can just start nearby. That's number 1. Number 2. Relationship with school guidance counselor. Every high schooler across the country, unless you are homeschooled, has a guidance counselor assigned to them. Now, these guidance counselors vary in terms of the number of students that they have. I've seen as little as like 40 students to one guidance counselor. I've seen as much as 600 students to one guidance counselor. But there's something important to understand. These guidance counselors are there to help. But in most cases, the student must proactively seek out that support. Now, if a student actively seeks out that support, there are basically 2 reasons it's going to help. One is that guidance counselor actually will say, oh, this student is in front of me, I'm now going to help them, right? In a lot of scenarios, it's just difficult for them to keep track of 300 or 400 or 500 kids, and so the student must proactively seek out that support. But 2, the second reason why developing a relationship with your guidance counselor is so important is the fall of your child's senior year. That guidance counselor, that one we're talking about, who might have 40 other students or might have 400 other students, will be in charge of writing a letter of recommendation that will go to every single school your child applies. And that letter of recommendation will have your child's name at the top. And I can guarantee you, if your high schooler actually develops a relationship with your guidance counselor over multiple years, meaning sophomore year, junior year, into senior year, that letter of recommendation will be much stronger. You've got to think about it. If a guidance counselor is writing hundreds of letters of recommendation, for the most part, they're going to be pretty generic, pretty template. If your child develops a relationship with that individual, they're going to make sure that letter of rec just has a little bit more thought into it. And these days, things like that can be the tiebreaker between getting accepted and getting waitlisted, or getting waitlisted and getting rejected. So I strongly encourage you to tell your high schooler to develop a relationship with their guidance counselor. By the way, I didn't do that. I wish I had. A lot of the tips in my program come from what I did incorrectly. And if I had had a stronger relationship with my guidance counselor, I know that letter of rec would have been stronger, but also I would have got a lot more free advice, especially if you attend a public school. That advice is free. And if you attend a private school, well, your parents have already paid tuition, and so it really is free anyway. So I strongly encourage you to develop a relationship with your guidance counselor, or if you're a parent watching this, tell your high schooler to do so. Number 3, Saturday morning test. What is the Saturday morning test? The Saturday morning test is the following. Hypothetical scenario. This comes from one of the greats, Cal Newport. I mention him in a lot of my materials, but the Saturday morning test. Hypothetical scenario. You, as a high schooler, I refer to you as a high schooler in this scenario. And again, if you're a parent watching this, just put your high schooler in this scenario. Wake up on a Saturday morning. There's no homework to do. You cannot turn on screens, meaning no TV, no internet, no TikTok, no phones, anything. You can't go back to sleep. What would you as a high schooler do? You have no obligations. What would you do? What would you explore? The answer to this question is something that honestly you should start exploring immediately. Here's why. Colleges care about your interests. And a lot of students then get hung up and they say, oh, I've heard about like extracurriculars matter and things I do outside of school, but I'm just not really sure. Just start exploring things you're interested in. Take one extra level deep understanding of things that you're interested in, and it's going to go a long way. Here's what's going to happen. Instead of thinking about the end in mind of, oh, how is this going to help with college applications? Just start exploring things you're interested in. And what's going to happen is the snowball effect. It's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And next thing you know, if you have just taken a liking to this thing or a couple things that you actually enjoy doing, the answer to your Saturday morning test, it's going to snowball into something that very likely could be presentable and impressive in college admissions. Just start exploring. Do the Saturday morning test. Think about it. Think about what your answer is. And then just dive deep. It might be as little as just get a book on the topic. Or it might be something else. But the point is, a lot of students get hung up thinking about the end result when the low-hanging fruit is just start exploring and see where it goes. As an example of this, right, I had a student years ago who was very interested in fantasy football. And I said, just start exploring. Just start dive into it. Next thing you know, years later, he had an entire blog related to his math on picking his lineups, how to optimize his lineups, everything. But on that day, if we had said, okay, you're going to create an entire blog with your algorithms on your lineups, he wouldn't have had that. Eventually, he had it, and it became super impressive, and it was a part that we put into his college applications. But at the start, I said, just start exploring fantasy football. Just start exploring how you can be a better fantasy football player. If that's actually your Saturday morning test answer, go. And it was amazing to see where he ended up with. So that's the low-hanging fruit. Just start exploring and think about the results later. Colleges want to see interesting, unique applicants, and that is the easiest way to start down that train. Number 4, SAT and ACT. Take both. Recently sent out a blog about this, so you might have seen this, but I think it's really important to understand. The standardized test, if done well, if you score well, is the second most important characteristic in all of college admissions behind your grades. Now, I also did a YouTube video you can go back and see, I think in the end of 2022, on inputs to outputs and how the input of high school grades, 4 years of work, does lead to the highest output, the most important factor in college admissions, which is your high school grades, right? So a large input, 4 years of work, to a large output, the most important factor in college admissions. But the sweet spot here is the standardized test, because the input, typically, you can go and see a lot of my webinars I've done with Larry Chung, founder of Tiger Way Prep. The input to go from a mediocre average score to an elite score, we're talking mid 1400s, 1500s SAT, and obviously in that kind of 32 to 34 ACT range. The input is typically 6 to 9 months of consistent but not crazy levels of studying. 6 to 9 months. Compare that to 4 years of your high school. And guess what? It's only one notch below in terms of the output of importance. It's the second most. So the input is relatively low. The output is still relatively high. So now we talk about the low-hanging fruit, because as I bring that up, you can see the value, but what's the low-hanging fruit? The low-hanging fruit is to get a baseline score of each test. It is silly to take both tests after you figure out which you prefer. It is smart to take both tests to figure out which you prefer. I'm going to say that again, it's that important. It is silly to continue to take both tests and figure out, oh, I got a 1200 here, I got a 30 here, let me take them both again. Take each test once, figure out which test you preferred, which is ideally the test you scored better on. Forget about the other test and go all in on the test that you prefer. In 13 years of doing this, seeing 160 or so students come through my program, it's about 50-50, SAT, ACT. Colleges do not care. There's a bias on the coasts of the United States where families say on the coasts, like I grew up in the East Coast, they say, oh, SAT, don't colleges really want to see that? No, that is a myth. They don't care SAT or ACT. Just figure out which test is right for you. They do have their differences. The ACT has a science section. The SAT doesn't. The SAT is about to go digital, which, by the way, that'll be a whole different topic that we get into. But sign up for each test. Take each. If you get a 0, it doesn't matter. You don't have to submit your score to any colleges. Just get that baseline. As an aside, if you are interested in getting a baseline, but you say, I really just don't want to sign up for, pay for the tests, and go and sit for 4 hours in a gym and take it, okay, you can go on to College Board or ACT.org. They have free practice tests that you can download and take on your own. Just to let you know, it's a lot harder. It's a lot harder to simulate a testing environment in your bedroom or in your kitchen, in your home. You can do it, and if that's how you want to get your baseline, go for it. But the low-hanging fruit is to figure out which test is for you, and then you can mentally block off the other test. Number 5, study habits. I'm not going to go on a rant about study habits right now. That might be for another video. But there are 2 study habits that, if you embrace, are going to change your life. They're going to change your life, okay? And the first is airplane mode, and the second is 50-minute chunks. Let me explain both. Remember the number 1 most important factor in all of college admissions? Your high school grades and the rigor of classes you take. I find it crazy that there are college coaches across the country that start with things like, let's talk about your reach schools and safety schools. Let's talk about your college essay. The low-hanging fruit is to make sure that you are sound and have sound habits in the single most important factor in college admissions, your high school grades. Now, I obviously am kind of a nerd about this stuff, and so I have dozens and dozens and dozens of study habit tricks that I give my students in my programs. But for this video, let's talk about the low-hanging fruit. This is the 80-20 of study habits, meaning the 20% of study habits that I give that absolutely, you can ask any of my students, give the 80% of the outputs. Number 1, studying with your phone on airplane mode. In 2010, when I was a senior in high school, phones, really the smartphone hadn't existed yet. I still had a phone, and even then I remember discovering how important it was to just keep my phone like downstairs in the kitchen when I studied up in my bedroom. Now, in 2023, as I'm making this, right, we have a computer in our pocket. We have a constant distraction device in our pocket. And so I tell my students when they join my program in the first week, they actually have a challenge, which is to 1 night of homework over that first week after they join to study with their phone on airplane mode. That means airplane mode, in a drawer, away, gone. You cannot be contacted. You cannot access the internet, nothing. In fact, if you want, you can just turn it off, but that seems to be too much for some of my students. So airplane mode. This is for two reasons. One, obviously you're not going to get distracted, but what people don't understand is it's not just about the distraction. It's not just about the 10 seconds it takes to respond to a text or the 5 seconds it takes to watch a TikTok reel. It's actually about the after effects. There's a lot of studies out there that say that it takes your brain many minutes to get back into kind of that deep studying state. So it's not just, oh, I'll just answer this text for 10 seconds. It's actually by you even associating your brain with distraction and then engaging in that distraction, it can cost you a lot of time in terms of deep studying. Now you have to get back into, okay, what was it that I was reading? Which line was I on? And even then, right, now you have to re-engage your brain into that hard studying state. Distractions are devastating. Study with your phone on airplane mode and it will change your life. Combine it with this one and you're absolutely cruising. Number 2, study habit, 50-minute chunks. I have my students do this in week 1 of my program as well. And again, the responses are pretty exceptional. The human brain studies most effectively in typically small bursts with tiny breaks. This is extrapolated when you're dealing with teenagers whose frontal cortexes haven't developed yet. Right? If you're a parent watching this, me, I'm 31 years old, our frontal cortexes have developed. Our brains study a little differently than a teenager's. The most efficient way for teenagers to study is in 50-minute chunks, 50, with 10-minute hard, real, actual breaks. 50 minutes on, 10 minutes off. Now here's the key about this. The 50 minutes on of studying, if you can combine that with an airplane mode, it just makes it much more like you're actually studying for those 15 minutes, right? I usually have my students set a timer. Part of the reason I say airplane mode and not off is if they want to use their phone as a timer, as long as it's on airplane mode, go for it. Or they can use a watch, or they can use the microwave, whatever they want. But 50 minutes of studying. If they get to a point where they're super bored at the 30-minute mark, sorry, then you're going to have to sit there. Point is, you're training your brain, but here's the beauty. It's not like you're telling a high schooler, oh, go in for, a 4-hour marathon of studying and don't come out of your room until you're all done. That just doesn't work, right? It doesn't even work with me and my 31-year-old brain. A 4-hour slog is a slog. And at the end, there's diminishing marginal returns where you're just not going to get the value out of studying. But if you can say, hey, study for these 50 minutes, hard 50-minute studying, and then a 10-minute break. Now here's the key. That break should be a real, legit break. That break should be get up out of your chair, go walk around, go down to the kitchen, go get some food. If you want to turn your phone off airplane mode and respond to that Instagram DM, go for it. If you want to go hug your mom and go eat some food, go for it. If you want to go walk around the block, go for it. Make it a real, complete separation from the desk, from studying, and enjoy the break. And set that timer for 10 minutes. Then, when that 60-minute cycle is complete, reset. Now, here's the deal. This is kind of intense, right? But the nice part of it is the breaks help kind of soften it, and you would be shocked if you do 2 or maybe even 3 of these sessions in a night, just how productive you will be, how much you will get done on the studying front. Now, in a future video, I'll talk about, if you have mastered these airplane mode and 50-minute chunks, actually how to study, like a smarter way to study and actually have an end to studying, but that'll be for another video. We'll get into kind of the more technical aspects of what you're studying. The fact remains, the 80-20 is, if you put your phone on airplane mode while you study, and if you study in 50-minute chunks, I don't even care how you're studying, you're going to be tremendously more effective at it than if you don't do this. So study actual tactics for another time, but in terms of study habits, this is the low-hanging fruit. If you do these 2, it will be life-changing. And again, we're talking about the single most important factor in college admissions. This is not talked about enough when it comes to college planning. All right, number 6. I did not do this, what I'm about to write, when I was in high school, to be clear. Take 10 minutes as a high schooler. Sit down, and the only goal of the 10 minutes is to actually think about your future and what you might want to study in college. A couple things about this. First is, if you get to the end of these 10 minutes and you still have no idea, that is okay. That is okay. But here's the thing. High schools don't really have students do this that often. And if I had done this, spent just 10 minutes in high school thinking about what I might want to do in college, I think it would have vastly helped my eventual college applications. Instead, I never once thought about this, ever. So I applied to college undecided, which again, I'll do a whole other video on that. The most common major in the as high school seniors to submit to colleges is undecided in the United States. But if you think about your future for even 10 minutes and make that your objective, here's my guess of what's going to happen. For some students, you're actually going to, for the first time, be asked to think about what you might want to do in college. And for some students, you're going to know. Some students you're going to know. Now, that wouldn't have been me, okay? But for some students, you will know. And if you know, it will make the remainder of college admissions significantly easier. I'll do another video at some point on kind of this category 4 of admissions, your story. But the easiest way to identify your story is to work backwards from where you want to go. If you spend 10 minutes and just sit down and have no phone, go airplane mode, have no phone, and you just think about, what do I want to do in college? Like, what do I think I would want to do? And you get to a point where you say, you know what? I think this could be a great major. Let's just use, for example, economics could be a great major. Okay, great. The fact that you sat and thought about that for 10 minutes and you even think that you might have a potential major in mind, guess what you can now start to do? That is your kind of shining star at the end, and you can work backwards. So you can now start saying, okay, category 4 of admissions is your story. What things can I start to do throughout high school to align with that story if I want to be an economics major, right? Is there any type of like economics journal that I might be able to write an article to and submit? Is there any type of like very small business that I want to create that obviously aligns with economics, supply, demand? What other things can I start to do? Or maybe it's just like, if I really want to be an econ major, I'm kind of interested in that. Can I find the most popular economics book of all time and read it, right? And again, on the theme of like just kickstarting what you might be interested in, it might be worth you actually exploring. It all just starts with sitting down for 10 minutes though, and this is the low-hanging fruit. This is what I never did, and this is what I ask my students now to do. Some students will sit down at the end of 10 minutes and still have no idea, and that is okay. But I will tell you, from a low-hanging fruit perspective, my guess is a significant portion, if they don't like decide on a major, will at least for the first time be asked to think about it, and it'll help them think about then the next steps, which is, okay, even if I don't have a major, and I've decided, okay, I'm actually kind of interested in maybe this area or this area, again, you can start to work backwards and you can say, okay, maybe I don't know my major, but if I'm interested in like this thing and I could see myself maybe majoring in that thing or that thing in college, what items do I have that are line up with that? Because these days in 2023 with college admissions at a record low, it has never been more important to have a clear, concise story. It has never been more important to say, hey, here is what I'm interested in. Here is what either I want to major in or I'm just interested in college. And here are the things that I have done throughout high school that align with that story, that path. You can't do this if you don't spend 10 minutes thinking about your future. I never did. I applied undecided. I got kind of lucky. I have a whole nother video on that. A lot of my teachings are based on what I wish I had done. So low-hanging fruit, spend 10 minutes with your teen. Sit them down at the kitchen table and just say, let's just have a brainstorm, right? Maybe, right, the ideal scenario is your teen in those 10 minutes is like, I know I want to major in this. Thanks, Mom and Dad. Ideal. But even if they come away and say, I still don't really know, I still think there's value in it because you can start thinking about how are we going to present your path so that when college admissions eventually reviews your application and sees what you might want to do in college, your path aligns somewhat, right? The students these days who have great grades and test scores and are getting rejected, my guess are the ones that have no category 4. They don't have a path. When college admissions looks at their application, it looks like a bunch of scattered things that have no correlation. This is the low-hanging fruit to at least get closer to a clear, concise path. just spend 10 minutes thinking about what you might want to do. That's all. So I hope this was helpful. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. And I have a bonus. I made an entire video about this, so I'm not going to go into the nitty gritty. ED, early decision. You can go check it out. The title of the video is called The 2 Cheat Codes to College Admissions. A hint, one of them is this. So this is number 7. Quick example, my alma mater, Vanderbilt, if you apply, I think the most recent data is 4.6% acceptance if you apply in the regular decision window. If you apply in the early decision window, meaning you just check a box, it says your commitment. A lot of details about early decision I won't get into, but basically it's just you check a box and you apply in a different window. You go from 4.6% to last year's data, 24% acceptance rate. This is the low-hanging fruit using this tool. Now, yes, there are restrictions, there are nuances to it, there are things to understand. I won't go into this video, but when families start, when it comes time for application window and they're saying, should I put a period here in the essay? How should I phrase this opening sentence? My one question is, what window are we applying in? We'll talk about where to put your period and capitalization, etc. The low-hanging fruit is this, right? And if you're saying, oh, I'm not quite sure what the application windows are, then I strongly encourage you to review what the many application windows are that schools offer and the insights into that. I have a bunch of free material on that. You can go check out my blog. You can apply it to my free college confidence community. I have an entire lesson on that. But either way, understanding early decision is the bonus low-hanging fruit that I will offer today. I hope you found this enjoyable. I certainly did. I'll kind of figure out the glare on the whiteboard here, but I hope this was helpful. If you are interested in seeing more of these videos, click the like button, click the subscribe button. I think it helps with the YouTube algorithm, so more of these will pop up when I actually create them. And until next time, cheers. Have a happy college planning process.